There was a feature. The whole that on by Jackson's. Down for possibility. People.
Some people are crazy.
People are Asians.
Okay, well, let's,
It's a moment of meditation.
pretty much, yeah. Let's have a new babysitter and dinner. We're all good. Great, well, let's call this meeting to order. Now start by taking attendance. Roger?
Here.
Steve,
Here.
Portia,
Here,
Craig.
Here.
Chuck,
Here.
Peter,
Here.
we're here, great, hi. John,
Here.
Jen, and I have Michael on our list. So he's like. Great. Okay. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes. Did everyone?
So they're just notes of your last meeting that Autumn took while
Meeting
your
notes?
guys were going through. But I didn't know if you guys want, I can go back through the video, we do the attendance, like unless you guys want to add that, or you can add that now and I can just update it before I post it to the website, that kind of thing. I don't know who was here last time.
I didn't know that actually. Yeah, I don't.
Okay.
recall. Sorry.
The last time.
But that, what you have in front of you is the meat of, I guess.
We're all connected. People were here last.
Oh, so I don't have anything from that.
No, this was,
So after that.
it was Safe Streets for All presentation from.
Yeah.
Cashel at GP Cog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, we went over
This piece in the
the
middle.
Scarborough piece of that,
Yeah,
then we went over the,
basically, these were recommendations
the
from the
transportation
committee.
study, yep.
yeah, okay.
Those notes, Angela, were from the September meeting.
Say that again?
Those notes that I sent you were from the September meeting.
I don't think we had a September meeting.
I think
Is-
we did.
The last one I have is August 27th.
Yeah.
Oh,
Which is
well, then
close.
that's what they were from. It's been already 2 months? 3? It
I know.
doesn't feel like it was that long ago.
Labor Day.
Yeah.
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 Lost its way
I
already.
guess I hope though that if you guys read through it, that that's kind of the meat of it, and I can, for the next meeting, we can vote if you want to table it. I can put together, essentially, I wasn't there, I'll just say that there's a presentation by GP Cog, and then there was public comment, but we do have the video, and the video is online.
Yeah.
Does that work for
I think so, yeah.
the group, or if you guys want to provide me more information, that's fine too.
I mean, I kind of have some recall on this, but
Yeah, yeah.
not,
Okay, nothing glaring.
nothing, no.
That you're like, that's, okay. That's all, and then I can. put together the- Like I said, it won't be detailed.
I mean, as a side note, I watched a guy riding his bike on the other side of Route 1 from John, or not John's, what's the pizza place there? In the grass, trying to ride his bike in that little tiny footpath until he hit a pole. You know, the pole was right there and he comes right up to the pole and he went, and he got off his bike and he walked it around the pole and then he got back on. Oh, my word.
There might be other issues. Oh.
We need sidewalks over there
Where was that?
on Route 1,
Where?
north of the pizza place, north.
Pat, right across the street here?
Yeah,
Oh.
well, yeah, right,
Yeah, okay.
further north, yeah,
Oh,
going up
center,
towards
yeah.
Starbucks.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yep,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Okay,
Practical this meeting, yeah, check.
sorry. I think the next, that's great. The next item is to review the transportation study.
Yes. So let me pull, I don't know if you want to start with the bike and ped section. So it's kind of two sections, and I know I gave it to you as two documents. So there's the bike and ped section is why we were kind of late and meeting and why we didn't meet in September. We've been waiting for the updates associated with that. And then I was hoping, I'm sorry, I confused things about trying to move it up, but I really didn't want to wait a whole nother month just to go over that section. And so we were hopeful that every week that we were gonna get it, and we never got it. So it got to a point where like, okay, and I think I heard from Roger too, it is good to have a consistent meeting time and date. So I think that totally does make sense. And so we ended up pushing it out because we were only gonna save a week at that point. So this is the section we were waiting for, that you guys had the comments
So
from.
this is the report.
This is what I sent you.
The
I
draft,
emailed you. Yeah, the section 2 is what I have up on the screen, which is the bike and ped. Mobility, safety and connectivity. I guess
Now, before we go any
Yeah.
further, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Just procedure wise? What goes on after we talk about this at this meeting?
so what we've done every time that we,
Yeah.
I know we've gone through this multiple times.
Yeah.
Autumn and I both take our notes and actually, draft up, that's where you saw like Autumn's last meeting minutes. And we actually sat down with the consultant
Okay,
and kind of go through and say, here's some missing pieces, or we'd like some more information here or there. So we both do separate kind of reviews and then come together, which has actually been working, I think, fairly well. Autumn, I don't know if you want to speak about that, but
and ultimately it goes to the town council?
ultimately, all reports get. Actually, the council hears it, sees it, they can endorse it, they can, I don't know what else.
That's like what we did for the COGS master plan.
Yeah.
Was we just reviewed it and accepted the
Right,
the
accept it.
study.
So there's different levels, right? Accepting, endorsing, like, yeah.
Okay, and besides this committee, are there any other committees or bodies providing any input on this?
Not at this time, but we
Okay.
can talk about that as I put on the agenda. Jen and I talked a little bit about what you guys want to move on from here. So once we get this final draft, how does that move forward?
Yeah.
But that's, yeah, the next topic,
Okay,
once we get there.
Yeah, and like not necessarily other committees too, but we did have some public input on this one
Yep.
early on too,
Yep.
so.
I think it's been helpful, and that's why I was saying if Autumn want to chime in, I think Autumn and I come at it from very different directions, which I think has been helpful in making this more well-rounded.
Mm.
I don't know, what you think, Autumn, but it's always interesting, to come at it, like I said, different directions rather than us kind of like, you know, as like-minded. And so I'm hopeful if this covers a lot of things. I did want to talk about, I think, some holes or weaknesses a little bit and see what this committee thinks about that, but I'm anxious to hear you guys, comments, and if you want to go section, I guess it's up to you, Jen, how you want to approach this. By section or by just overall thoughts, at the beginning, if there are some gaps or issues.
Well, I know we sort of did a deep dive on the section 2 last time, or a good thorough look at it. So maybe if we, I guess unless, if anyone has any sort of like burning overarching general comments, we could start there. And if not, then maybe I would suggest going through.
Peter's got his hand raised.
Okay, great, thank you. Yes, Peter.
Sorry, I'll use a little hand feature in the future too. I guess I still have a challenge on the overall structure of this study. Both the bike section and the other sections make this feel much more like an intersection study, not a connectivity or a transportation study. And if we're thinking of this, and I think the conversations we've had have led me to believe that this is meant to be kind of a master plan for the road networks in town. It fails on that measure. It's not really a master plan for the roads in the town. It's really a study of intersections and particular hot points that may warrant individual focus or attention, but it doesn't provide us with a comprehensive overview of what the town needs for both bike, car mobility, pedestrian safety, etc., connections across town. So, I mean, again, as a study of problem intersections or as a safety study, I think it stands fairly well on its own feet. But as a transportation study or as a transportation plan, it's not really living up to the purpose. So that's my high level comment. But again, if our intention is really just to provide the town council with a focus on specific intersections that need attention, then this does a fairly good job of that. But I'm just not sure that that's maybe what the town council was hoping for, or what we're hoping to achieve.
I have some questions, but I guess that my last question, Peter, I guess I'm anxious to hear from maybe you, John, and what you are expecting out of that.
The way, what I see from this, and I think it's similar to the Parks and Recs master plan that I just referenced, where I see this as we're getting kind of like an inventory of opportunity. And at some point that inventory needs to turn into a near, mid, and long-term plan of priorities. And I see that kind of in here. I see pieces of this one's high, medium, low, here's the dollars. But I think, and again, I think that's maybe not something we need this study to do, but maybe that's the next step for this committee, is to partner with you and Autumn to really think about our CIP as part of next year's budget around all of the things that have come in here to help come forward with a recommendation on what really is kind of our investment plan to address a lot of these things. Because I saw 13 intersections that, like Peter said, that need a lot of work. I saw there's maybe some near-term things we can do that are relatively cheap, but then there's some longer-term major improvements, and some things need studies. So I think there's a lot of work to be done to like activate what we've learned in this effort. And then the same thing for the bike and peds. Again, it's like there's a great opportunity. Where do we start? And how do we, like, what does our 5-year plan look like, and what's the investment? And again, I see that as work potentially that this committee continues with this as like a guide to help turn this from, a list of, needs into an actual implementation plan. I think of that like when we did the comprehensive plan too, right? You do the comprehensive plan, and then there's an implementation plan component, which I know Autumn right now is, and staff are working to say, okay, how do we implement all of these things? And we have to prioritize. So I feel like this gives us kind of the scan of what's possible, and now we need to like turn it into an implementation plan.
Okay, well, to build on that, it's matrix management. I mean, you got a whole bunch of things going on here, and how do you tease them out? And it still is focused on vehicular transportation. I mean, that's still the major focus. And hopefully what we can do is begin to say, okay, it's not just that.
Yeah.
So we get into the connectivity issues. We get into, okay, how do we deal with Route 1? How do we deal with Gorham Road in terms of connectivity for all 3 modes? And what is our strategy for moving people out of cars for short distance onto other things? But until we know what we've got, we can't really address that. And that's where the high crash and some of these other, the trouble intersections present some really complicated solutions.
My question, I guess, is we by focusing on the intersections and focusing on the intersections of the crash data, we actually have almost no focus or no commentary whatsoever on corridors. So we run the risk of having isolated islands of safe intersections, and then corridors which you actually can't, from a pedestrian or bicycle perspective, effectively go between those islands. If that makes any sense. So, that lack of discussion about the corridor connectivity between the major intersections, I think is what drops this study from the level of a transportation study to a simple intersection study or an intersection or traffic control study at the intersection level. And again, at that level, it does a very good job. The data is well presented. It's very coherent. But for people wondering, well, okay, how can I travel from Dunstan to Oak Hill, or from Oak Hill to Eight Corners? You're really challenged to understand from this study what the town's logic is on establishing corridor
No, I agree.
Yeah.
No,
Go on.
no.
Well, I was gonna say, it seems to me also you gotta integrate the, like the group one study that was done.
Yeah.
Into this, and then.
Yeah.
I recall being at a meeting many years ago where I was told that Public Works has a priority list of roads that they work on. Are you
What do you
aware?
mean priority?
Well, they know, for instance, some roads need work, you know, in near term.
Yeah.
And others maybe medium,
Yeah, there's a pavement, the condition
Right.
assessment they
and
do. Yeah.
maybe that should be, I mean, we're talking about bike paths and things like that.
Mhm.
I mean, if Public Works knows they're gonna be doing, say. My favorite road, Fog Road,
I knew you were gonna do
well, they ought to, you know, make sure that. If
But I-
that's a high priority for
But
a
I think
bike
this,
path.
the strategy here was to say with an overlay of what is our strategy from getting from point A to point B.
Yeah,
As opposed to just, you know, if you've got something, this little piece here and this little piece here, we're trying to figure out how do we connect all of those
right,
things?
yeah.
And so the hope would be, it's not just a vehicle strategy, it's also a bike and pet.
Right, yeah.
Strategy,
And to become a tool that would be helpful in the case of Public Works.
right?
So they don't have to decide, you know, they don't have to make those.
Or they're
They should
guided,
be making the
They're
pavement
guided, yeah.
decisions based on pavement conditions, but if there's additional context that this effort can provide that says like.
like
that-
Spurwink.
That would align and say, oh, wow, you have this corridor that has really bad pavement and. The town has a goal has identified that as a priority corridor for, you know, pedestrian travel. Maybe it's something really specific, or this is a key bike route, or, you know, this, or to the contrary, this is a really constrained corridor that does need paving, but we know we can't achieve some of these other outcomes because of that. And therefore, this is a corridor that should be focused on for an off-road or some other type of connectivity.
And that's really where the corridor, that's really where the corridor concept, I think, came across strongly as lacking in this document. I'm not sure you could give this to Public Works and say, well, Public Works is saying, you know, we know Spurwink Avenue is ragged, we have to do stuff on that. But this doesn't tell Public Works that's also a priority for pedestrian and bike activity. So so they're going to go into their mode of repaving, which is what they do. I mean, that's fair. It's okay. But I think we owe them a grid or an overlay, which says, here are what we are prioritizing as bike and pedestrian corridors. Don't repave that road if we also want to add 6 feet on either side to allow for safer bike travel at a starting point.
I guess that's the question is like, when we think of the original scope of
Yeah.
what this was it,
I guess that's what I wanted to circle back to, that I think what I actually wrote down, I like your quote of, it's an inventory of opportunities. That's really what this is. And in order, I think what I'm hearing maybe from Peter, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, is what Roger mentioned. We have a Route 1 corridor study. That happened. We have that. This is another piece that's more of the kind of overarching, and to your point, that then do we need a Gorham Road we have a Gorham Road master plan. We're gonna have a Payne Road master plan. We need maybe Broad Turn is the next one that we need to kind of look at as kind of the corridor studies, because I think to implement this in one document, well, I think the master plan, it's not what we used, because we don't. Yeah, it's like, what do you call this? I
Yeah.
think that's the tricky part, because it isn't a master plan. A master plan, to Peter's point, would be, we have everything
Yeah.
identified.
Is it just a study?
And that would be probably a 5-year study and cost
Yeah.
$500,000. It would be expensive and it would take a
This-
long time to get to each of those. And then by the time we got to that,
Be too
we've
late.
changed our mind because now we're heading in this direction, right? So you don't wanna.
Well, no, I'd be careful about that because we have a
Yeah.
comprehensive plan for the town.
Yeah,
Which should guide this in all cases. If we change it in 10 years, it's because the comprehensive plan has changed. It's not because of other things in the background. That's
well,
kind
it
of
sounds like you were wanting to get into details, and so this is higher, like, so we talk about complete streets, and I think that is part of every conversation with Public Works when we do anything. Even to the matter of when they pave, I have a conversation with them about where the striping goes, so we start narrowing lanes and things like that, adding, and it increases your bike, or shoulder. Those type of things are, I think, ingrained, so I wanna make sure I give Public Works credit for those type of things, cause I think they are trying to do. I think they are a lot better than they ever have been in trying to incorporate complete streets. I mean, Gorham Road is a perfect example of that. That was a Public Works project that started that way, and it's grown, so.
my point, I guess, is more about how we name this, how we present it, and how we describe it to be used. So you're right, it's not a master plan, and I think we can all agree on that. As a transportation study, it really is. I think I love the words that John used. It's really an inventory. It's an intersection inventory that allows us to prioritize and understand the relative dangers and opportunities that exist for individual intersections around town. It's
I
not a
think
corridor.
that's bigger than an intersection, so
Yeah,
I
I
guess
think
I would disagree with
it's
that.
per section. I mean, the descriptions in here are more than an intersection. It's
Yeah.
from point A to, good distance on Route 1.
We're looking for opportunities of connectivity. So we not only have high crash safety issues, but we are also looking at issues of connectivity on three levels, vehicular, pedestrian, and also bicycle. And how we get to point A to point B, how you get to the beaches, how you get to town hall. And what the pinch points are.
I guess I have to. I need some help seeing that because I did not grab that information from when I did the read. I saw if you looked at the town and village zones in town, and I know that's a zoning conversation, not a transportation conversation. But if you look at Dunstan, if you look at Oak Hill, if you look at that, there was some those town and village zones had a bit more comprehensive qualities to them, but partly that's because there are more intersections in those areas, not because the connectivity within those areas was explicitly addressed.
But we've also looked at sidewalks, particularly sidewalk connections. How you work looking at the downs, for instance, how you look at connections in the rest of the town. One of the things that we did as a preliminary to this, Peter, was we asked people to come from the public and give us information about where is it they want to go as a pedestrian or as a bicyclist, and where are they coming from. So we were trying to figure out how we get people from one place to another in ways that to destinations that they wanted to go. So do we say that Gorham is a major bicycle route, or do we say there are bikeways in other places? And so I think what we're trying to do here with regard to opportunity, but also looking at where our pinch points are. I mean, we've got a comprehensive plan, but we've also got a lot of buildings going on and so on. How do we make sure that we get the sidewalks that we need, as opposed to the sidewalks that are to nowhere?
I think Akon is a good example right now, that's playing out, with the apartments going in there and the work being done there. The sidewalks will be going in there, new signals will be going in there, and that's a village center.
Yeah,
So whenever anything's being done at the village center, all that is being considered and incorporated.
now, yes, yeah.
Sidewalks are in.
Now, let me just throw another thing, if I may. And this has to do with the downs, all right? And at their more recent workshops, I sensed a change of strategy regarding the downtown center.
Mhm.
When they originally came up with the concept, it was primarily focused on the people who lived there.
Right, it was insular almost.
Right, and they wanted to have people walk into well, now that they have, and I'm not making a judgment on it, I'm just saying, I think it's a change in strategy. And with this new consultant they have from Boston, he's looking at this being more of a regional attraction. So there's gonna be a whole bunch more traffic. If it's gonna be a regional, if people from Oklahoma, Portland, or Saga wanna come up to, use that town center for the entertainment or whatever it may be. So,
But if we can get them to places where they can easily walk and bike without putting a whole lot of traffic congestion within that. How do we begin to focus on some of that as well?
as an example, the planning board throughout the, sessions with the towns, we've often mentioned about a parking garage. And, we've mentioned it, but they've never been forthcoming. Now, all of a sudden, they are at least thinking about a structured parking, which to me is a garage, So it's just a change, it's a change in strategy, but it's not gonna be just cars from the local area. We're talking now about possibly cars coming in from, if it's an attraction, people are gonna wanna go there, just like, say they wanna go to Freeport, just to walk around.
Well, since you kind of are leading down I wasn't sure how to bring this up, but I guess I'm curious about, when I think about the downs and the number of people and the density. Think about transit, and I guess I'm curious what you guys think about. Maybe the lack of discussion on transit in here, or if it's just what I've heard, I think Roger jokes about it before, but it's not happening in Scarborough or something, but now we have a different animal sitting right in the middle of town. To your point, regional, maybe, the density, yes, you're kind of starting to check some boxes.
Yeah.
And you see these like, PAX and GPCOG starts talking about these mini hubs. Or, you start talking about micro or macro buses and different kind of levels. There's lots of complexity to transit. It's not, maybe everyone's on the same bus, right? There's little pieces to that, or if there's a parking structure, is that a park and ride that you can walk around, but you can also take a shuttle or bus or something. I think that's missing a little bit in this study, but also missing the Downs
Yeah.
big picture.
But just to go back to again, for
Yeah.
instance, they're talking about a grocery store. Well, I suspect that maybe talking about something like a Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. Now, if they were to put something in there right there, that would be an attraction to a lot of people from South of Portland. Instead of going to Portland to those two places. So that's a whole different animal.
But you've got a similar kind of dynamic with the beaches too, and so I think we've got some.
Well, the beaches are there already.
I know, but you still, there's still an attraction, and we're still
yeah.
dealing with wanting to increase the size of the parking
And
lot. So how do
they're a
we-
regional draw.
They're regional
Yeah.
draw.
Yeah.
Acosta would be.
I
So-
I would just say, like, I think for me, like, the piece that Peter said, and I think it's hard because we have like a section that's on pedestrian and bicycling separate from intersections.
Yeah.
And so how do you get to, I like the corridor concept, like we're talking about the Downs
Yeah.
as a corridor, we're talking about the beaches as a corridor. I feel like there needs to be some prioritization of what we've learned from this. To maybe say, okay, which corridors are the ones we want to start with first, second, third. To further evaluate how we bring some of these recommendations to life, where we're not losing sight of, we want pedestrian, we want bicycling, we want traffic improvements, connectivity. Where transit is appropriate, have transit be part of the conversation, because it might not be in every corridor, but I feel like that's,
Yeah.
to me, that's like the next step is there's all of this stuff.
Mhm.
How do we chunk that into meaningful things that we
A
can?
biteable.
Yeah, a
bite.
biteable bite, because right now it's a lot of good information,
Yeah.
but that's what I'm interested in seeing, and I don't think the study's gonna give us that, I think
Right.
that's the work of this
There's
committee
there's
to
another
help.
Step there.
Yeah.
I wonder if that could be,
Implementation,
I wonder if they could be guided in some way and not, I don't. To be clear, I'm not talking about a strict correlation, but informed in some way by maybe our zoning or
Yeah.
something. So, like a a treatment, be it intersection or corridor in a village center zone
Mhm.
looks one way.
Mhm.
But, you know, for our more rural roads out through, you know.
Yeah.
Our
Log-
zone or, you know, those.
So you're leading
less
right
dense,
into, actually, the council authorized a CIP, which is in Autumn's budget, and I think she's itching, she's
Yeah.
giving me a smirk.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're talking about, Jen, I feel like it's
Mhm.
complete streets. Is that what you're gonna throw in there, Autumn, and now your
No.
hands down?
I was just gonna kind of bring us back. So Peter's main contention is that we're calling it a townwide transportation master plan or whatever, and it's not those things.
Study,
And
it's
I
a
agree.
study.
So I'm thinking maybe it's something like a transportation inventory study, and then we take this and we build on it with, so my CIP, we're requesting to do these village plans or neighborhood plans or small area plans. And when we do those consultant led, they will take the parks facilities plan and they'll take the piece that is in here and they'll combine it with the comp plan and the zoning and give us a full picture. So I think this gives us like the tool that we can use to fill in some blanks and information, priorities. We know where the gaps are. It's kind of like the homework has been done for us. And then the cool stuff still needs to get done. So maybe if we call it that, I do know also when we give the consultants these final comments, they're supposed to be combining those matrix together. So you get one road corridor and then it's the street improvements, intersection, and then bike and head.
Yeah.
So it all sort of flows, but they weren't going to do that until we gave them the full comments because we wanted it to be more cohesive because it's very separate right now. So I think that'll probably make it more sense. So just to get back to the study itself, are there what's the best way to get final draft comments? You know, just like lines you hate or sentences that need to be added, just things like that, the meat of the document, because I don't want to steal Angela's thunder, but we have to take this to a public process. So we want to make sure that you all are good with, you know, a public facing draft and it'll all be combined. It'll be kind of, you know, the final document with a new title.
And Autumn, just to be clear, that's why I'm kind of focused on what we call this. Because
I get it.
The public credibility part of this. If we
Yep.
call this a transportation or a transportation inventory, then we're credible. We've established an inventory of specific tangible issues that we face across each mode of transport across town. We have not established prioritization of corridors. We haven't established prioritization of which town and village center we're dealing with, but we have gotten a good inventory together. Also, it's the mobile station without an E, not mobile, at the corner of Broad Turn and Route 1. I go there every week to fill up. So that was a fascinating change to me. But I think if we, and I hate to sound Chinese on this, but if we focus on calling things by their right names, then this study can do a lot. If we call it more than it is, we lose credibility and we prevent the process that will inevitably take place with long-range planning and other folks from being successful.
You know, the other thing that, you know, says it's gotta go public.
Yeah.
I think that's really important
Yeah.
because there's too many people in town. They think nothing's being done to deal with traffic, and things like that. And it's very important that people know that there's a lot of work going into, you know, that's one of my frustrations, that there's a lot of work being done by staff at all levels. And the townspeople don't realize, you know, we hear the same thing at meetings, you know, no one's dealing with growth and no one's dealing with traffic and so everybody's just.
And I think to your point, we're trying to do it like, okay, we're implementing here and we're designing here, but we also need to lay the cornerstone, right? We need to kind of do the first level piece, and that was one of the things that I thought you were circling back to what you had said, Jen. It was like looking at, say, Town Village Center. It was something Autumn's doing, but also what I wasn't even thinking of I was thinking of. The council has not approved her CIP for those yet, but they have approved is the revamp of our complete streets, which this group will be seeing, is updating our complete streets policy, which would include, hopefully, I'm hoping to get to is a guidance document that says, to your point, here's what you do at this type of intersection,
Yeah.
here's what you do along these types of corridors. And it's not gonna say this is what you do on Gorham Road, but it's gonna say this is what you do on major collectors and what you
Yes.
do on arterials
Yeah.
and then the rural sections
Yeah.
and local streets.
I-
So that's coming.
And
they
maybe
did an
guidance,
RFP
maybe
for that.
guidance is a good thing. You do draft townwide transportation guidance study, so it says you're looking at guidelines. I don't know,
But it
but
does, I think,
That-
yeah, Peter's right, I mean, I was trying to figure out what that is, I think Autumn had. Put some words around it too,
Like
because there's
inventory.
also a lot of detail too that I
Right.
this, there's the safety issues, there's very specific data on some intersections, like to what John's saying, is maybe some low hanging fruit, things we can do immediately, things that we should do immediately, things that can wait a little bit, I don't know.
The one thing from a public perspective, as this, to
Yeah.
Roger's point, like, I think, I agree with Peter, it's important to be clear what this is.
Yeah.
But I liked how Autumn kind of described how this will get activated and when people can actually expect to see some of the things in here come to fruition. Some of them may be near term that will
Yeah.
accomplish through the budget process in the next 5 years. Some are gonna require significant more work, study, et cetera. So I just feel like as it gets socialized, we just need to be clear what people can expect by when. I think of some of the other things with like the
Yeah.
downs where,
Has to do with funding.
yeah,
That's
Yeah.
critical, you mentioned that.
yeah. Well, like the one piece in here that I really liked was just for the Higas Parkway piece where it
Mhm.
showed all the different grants and, federal sources of funding
Oh, funding, yeah.
that we need to explore, because again, I think that's a huge lift in and of itself to say, we
and then
want
what it
this to
looks like,
happen.
and then what it looks like when all that's done, yeah, so you've got a product.
Cause this is probably like inventory that, and this is where I don't know the answer, but. Are we talking 30 years for all these things to get fixed? And this is just kind of gives us that inventory, like, we're not gonna fix all of this, and part of that's gonna be. A funding constraint, right? We have to prioritize, we can't do all of these.
Right, so I've started as a separate, just so you guys have some background, and I know Jen was part of when Portland put together their pieces for, there's a PAX or GPCOG has a Connect. Was it 2045? We came into it, I came into it in Scarborough, representing Scarborough and saying. I can give you a list of picking things out of the sky and throw it in there, but I'm about to get a transportation study. So I made sure and was an advocate for them to every few years, they do an update. And so this is our update and it's coming. We actually have a meeting coming up. Council probably just got an invite, but I have a list which has, as we've been drafting this from the consultants I've been pulling out of and kind of coming up with that list. And to your point, John, kind of looking at where does that make sense in timelines as far as cost and who we need help from partners, because it's a big lift. So we, in December, will be submitting our list for Scarborough, which is coming out of this study.
Mhm.
So, I think this has been super helpful to be able to pull that out, which I did not have when we did that exercise. And Scarborough had zero projects in the
Shot in the dark.
2045.
Yeah. So yeah,
But we are probably gonna have
that's-
20 or more projects in the update, right? So the 2050, and we'll have another opportunity to update in a few years, so they'll keep opening it up. For us to kind of fine tune that and put in new requests that come up, or as patterns change, we can adjust. And they're actually making all municipalities start kind of from scratch, which I was surprised at. They have to resubmit everything that you've already.
Even the 2045.
Yes. Which is good, because then maybe some things drop off and
Sure, yeah.
priorities change
Yeah.
and we kind of move forward and
It's a lot
so.
of work.
It's a lot
Wanna
of
do it.
work. Yeah, so I am pulling a lot out of this, so.
like
Staff is
housework.
feeling it's helpful to be able to move backwards
Yeah.
forward. And try to get to what I think council is talking, or John just mentioned, is trying to get us to, how do we kind of. I can't prioritize, but I can tell you, here's the slot of things coming
Mhm.
and.
Sometimes though, it's the money, like when we get the money, that's gonna prioritize, so if some of
Yeah.
these, we can get through that. Funding mechanism through GPCOG.
Yeah.
Then that might move something that's maybe lower priority, higher on the to-do list, cause
Cause the opportunity is
Yeah.
there, that goes back to your
Yeah.
opportunity, right, when we see it, we need to grab it,
Right,
right?
that can happen in different ways. It
Yeah.
can happen, the big, you know, the big ticket items
Yeah.
can happen through GPCOG and regional long range planning, but also this could be helpful on very small, shorter term options where opportunities where, you know, it's a private project or an otherwise regular, you know, repaving effort or something
Yeah.
like that. And we can say, oh, you know, oh, well, we had this on here. It was in our top 20 priority list, but if we don't have to go seek big regional dollars to do that because we can kind of take care of it in a different way,
Mhm.
that is helpful too. So yeah, it's like, I feel like a bucket of priorities that's
Mhm.
ranked, but with the expectation that we're not necessarily gonna knock them off in like 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
The other thing too is, and I said this to Rachel after our meeting last night, my board meeting, I said, Scarborough is a very dynamic town.
Mhm.
And, you know, some towns in Maine, nothing happens. You could have a long range plan that was developed 90 years ago.
Yeah.
But Scarborough is a very dynamic town. And 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been dealing with Holmes Road and Payne Road. It would be nothing. It would be just a way to get to someplace else. But now all of a sudden, that's changed,
Mhm.
and that's gonna change even more.
Mhm.
And, you know, so just in a few years, everything could just change so dramatically. It's just incredible. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying it's the nature of
reality.
where we are, where we're located and the desire to be here, you know?
But if we have overarching guidelines that say, you know, like complete streets, if we're gonna go in and do something, this is our objective,
Yeah.
so that there's an overall plan.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
And
what I'm saying is, we'd have a plan now, and 5 years from now, all of a sudden, a certain section of it is irrelevant, because everything's changed so dramatically.
Yes and no, but if you're looking at complete streets, if you're looking at how it's developed and you're,
If your guidance is solid.
Exactly,
and the
exactly.
plans Can change.
then
Yeah.
if the use changes, then those guides
Yeah.
can be modified,
Yeah.
but you gotta be there to be there.
And it's interesting that you say that. I actually think if you take a look at our comprehensive plan, we have anticipated a lot of the impacts of complete streets. And we anticipated at a town-wide level where changes are emerging and coming over the next 20 years. The problem with Scarborough is not so much that it's dynamic, it's that it is so non-homogeneous. Scarborough has lots of little villages and little areas that are increasingly coordinating and working more cohesively as a town. But we still have a concept where there are people in Higgins Beach and in Black Point who have no idea that Holmes Road exists. We have people who live in Blue Point and Pine Point who almost never go to North Scarborough. And yet they are impacting one another now by how relative traffic and load variances are changing around town. The great thing about this study is it lets people know that we're looking at things in a comprehensive way, so that if you think you've got problems in Pleasant Hill, well, we're also dealing with problems at Holmes Road and Broad Term, and we are dealing with things in Pleasant Hill. So to John's point earlier, the great thing about this inventory is that it's comprehensive and lets people in every little village in town know that we're thinking about them, but in a comprehensive way. What we're missing is that overlay of how we look at the connectivity that's emerging in the future. And that's okay. This is a great inventory document, and it's not going to be the be all end all. But I think if we as a transportation committee think of our next steps, we probably do need to start to thinking about what are those transportation corridors that we want to describe, and how do we start helping the town council prioritize those corridors, along with the fact that government funding or federal or state funding is going to come randomly from the sky and reverse that prioritization, whether we like it or not.
And I think some of that is starting, because we had some urgency around our traffic impact fees, we started pulling out from the draft, and so we do have 2 new Payne Road impact fees that really were coming out of this information. So to that point is, we have money now being collected to work towards some of these goals.
And my guess is, assuming the Gorham connector doesn't go forward, we're probably going to see a change in priorities around what happens on Gorham Road and Holmes and Broad Turn and all the roads that kind of connect us into Gorham and that part of southern Maine. So this study will give us a lot of information about what has to take place at those critical intersections and those critical corridors. And so, yeah, I like I said, I don't want to come across as saying this is a bad study. It's just not a comprehensive study. It's a good inventory, and it's a good inventory to guide our town staff and our town council on what to be thinking about as things emerge and going forward.
Not to touch the third rail here, but Peter did bring it up, so I'm going to mention that. I don't know if anyone has any comments, the fact that there's no discussion in here about kind of, well, I guess there is some on the congestion of North Scarborough, but about what happened there, because it was a question mark through this whole process of us developing this. It was such a kind of unknown on what direction we're gonna go in, that at this point, I feel like it's the elephant in the room here that we're not putting, so I feel like we need to address that. I think this group, I would love to hear feedback on how, or if, or what you want to say in this document around that, because we don't necessarily have an answer, which we don't need an answer, because as Peter mentioned, we have a lot of, here's all the
Right,
problems.
so that's what I was gonna say, was I think, just falling in line with that.
Yeah.
If we stay consistent.
Yeah.
We don't need to
The
provide
answer,
the
right.
answers here. What we need to do is talk about what the problems are.
Yeah,
And I actually think that will be incredibly helpful
Yeah.
for that conversation, whatever it looks like moving forward. Because even right now, at least according to the public council meetings where that was discussed, there's some question about what the problems even are.
yeah,
Depending on who you talk to. So, having maybe some data
Yeah.
behind that
Yeah.
would
Well, I
be
think,
really helpful.
and I would just say, I think the criticism from the public is similar to the conversation this group is having, in that the solution in that area was really just adding more roads to have mobility.
Mhm.
And it really missed the connectivity, the transportation aspect that I think
Multimodal.
everybody's looking for, not just one leg of the stool. They want to know what are all the pieces that are going to improve traffic and transportation in that corridor.
Including transit. which
Yeah.
was totally,
Yeah. And so I think
Ignore.
this is it's consistent, I think, with what we're talking about, where we need these corridor conversations where part of it may be a new roadway, part of it may still be an MTA partial solution, but it needs to be a comprehensive
Mhm.
package
Mhm.
that's addressing the right issues and desires of the community. And so this may actually help to kind of advance that conversation, because I do feel like we as a council have said we don't support the current solution,
Mhm.
but we still have a problem we need to address, and we need a
Yes,
partner. And with this meeting with GPCOG and PAX next week, I think that's that should be a bullet point somewhere that we talk about and say, we need to figure this out. We need GPCOG's help probably, because at least right now, we're not sure if the MTA proposal was the right one, but we need a solution.
Yeah.
Is, towns like Standish and, are they part of, GP?
They are, they might be in the planning, there's different regions, so they might be in our plan, like get planning money, but maybe not necessarily construction. money.
I was just wondering how much say they have in this whole thing.
Oh,
You know,
yeah, like,
because that's the problem there. Either,
Yeah.
if you're like here or in Portland, then you have to get there. And vice versa,
Mhm.
and that's been a problem for many, many years. I mean, I used to deal with it 15 years ago. And I'm sure it was probably before that.
Mhm.
Autumn, did you have
Yeah.
that?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think that the way we've framed up this study, it's okay if we don't have an extreme answer for the Gorham connector question. I think if we just present here's the issue, like you all kind of said that, I think we're
Yeah.
okay. We're not solving the world, we're not calling in a master plan, we're not solving the world's problems, so I think we're fine. Don't think we need to add a whole lot.
We do, I mean, I'm looking at section 4 is vehicle mobility, which I feel like is probably what we're gonna come up with. We talk about problem statements out there in North Scarborough, but that's what I'm hearing, it's the congestion piece, and so it is identified in our vehicle mobility section. However, when we break out and say, here are these intersections selected for corrective actions. It's not, but that's fine, like to your point, that we don't really have that.
Well, I think that's another, maybe a little aside, maybe they could be included if they're identified as problem areas, but if they are such problem areas because they're so significant regionally, in my opinion, we can mention it, that's fine, but to Autumn's point, we don't as a town need to solve that problem because it's a larger problem.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just our problem.
That's an example of what Peter was talking about earlier, that primarily is the Gorham connector is the residents who live along that corridor and the people who live beyond, okay? And the people who live over here, some of them don't even know that there's even a Gorham discussion about a Gorham connector going on,
Mhm.
so.
I do also just wanna follow up on one thing that you asked about, which is the transit topic, and that's sort of relevant to a number of things that we've just been talking about, including the Gorham connector piece, but just at a high level, I don't think we should not be talking about it. We should be including it, as a desire to be explored, and I feel like we've been studying that in
Mhm.
tiptoeing our way towards that for a long time. We don't have robust transit in Scarborough because we're not aiming for that. That's by design. We don't have that because that's what we're designing for, or not designing for. And the Downs, I know we've talked about this, but the Downs is a great example. I don't know, I'm not a transit expert, so I don't know what the magic density numbers are to make that work. I know that they have looked into it. Early on, they said it wasn't viable. I was skeptical of that then. I've remained skeptical of that now, having been out there and seen it myself. But and also that transit can look like a lot of different things. Yeah, maybe it's not a full 40-foot bus packed full of people going to Portland. Maybe that's not what transit looks like from there. But if anyone's ever had the pleasure of waiting in line to park their single occupant vehicle at the beach on a sunny Saturday in July, every time I drive by that line, I'll pick their kids up at beach camp. That's the one that really burns me. I don't even want to be here. Just take my car. Can you just roll out the door and go to camp? No. But if there was a bus that ran from a centralized location,
I mean, I just look at, we've got parking lots sitting right out here all summer,
nobody
not
parks in the
used.
high school all summer. You put 40 people on a bus, or you have 20 cars with 2 people in them, the space, demands of those are significant. And so anyway, those are just some examples, but I think that, some element of growth is inevitable, and we can choose to look at our transportation future in 2 different ways, as I see it. One that continues to get more and more congested because we're not willing, because we all want to continue traveling in the same ways that we used to do, that were viable when we were a little less dense. And we're experiencing more traffic on the road, and we just had if anyone's really up for a good time, you could listen to the planning board meeting from last night about what traffic is coming on Holmes Road, and the Payne Road area. But or we can start building ourselves some additional options, and those look like other modes of transportation, transit being one of them.
I think the one piece that you're saying that I think is important for people to understand is like, not all transit is equal to what you just said. Like,
Yeah.
it's not all 40, like a packed
Could be like
bus.
little, it's a
Shuttle
problem.
sort of thing, yeah.
Or if you've been up to Acadia or Bar Harbor, they've got
I think there's some
the
really
shuttle
good
thing that goes all the
examples
time.
that people can now maybe more literally relate to in some
It's like
other
15 or
areas.
20 passengers or
Yeah.
something like that with a bike rack
And the
on the
reason for
front.
that is because
People,
they were experiencing
too much traffic.
debilitating
We
congestion.
have
So-
that, we have that in the summer in Pine Point. I mean,
Yeah,
the little trolley, the
camper.
Bailey bus, I call it, that goes to
Yeah.
Bailey Campground and goes down to the beach and goes up to Old Orchard and all the rest. And plenty of people that I know use that to get to the train station in Old Orchard to go down to Boston. So now it only runs from whatever Memorial Day to September 15th, but that's when the density reaches a level which makes it really viable. And you
They
can
have
use
the
that
same-
actually for
They have the
ditching your
same
kid.
thing down- Yeah, they have the same thing in, Algonquin.
Yeah.
You know, the trolleys
Yeah.
down there, they take people from motels and hotels down to the beaches. I mean, I'm surprised that something like that hasn't happened here, especially where we have this vacant parking lot all summer long, you know,
Yeah.
that could be. a
Huge
revenue.
lot. I
Yeah.
mean, it's huge.
So. We're not inventing the wheel here.
Exactly,
It's-
right. Yeah, so sorry, that's a broad topic, but
No, that's
you
fine.
asked. That's what
You
I
asked.
thought.
So put in the report, we want some trolleys, okay?
Yeah.
Well, but looking at Gorham Connector is would some form of transit begin to relieve the amount of vehicular traffic along there? And where would it make the most sense? Because if people need to get from point A to point B to point C, how many to B and how many to C? I mean,
Yeah, and again, that's not an issue that Scarborough is gonna solve within Scarborough's boundaries, but having breadcrumbs in this study helps us go to GPCOG and say, please help us out, because we understand that this is a problem. We've done this inventory that recognizes this as a possible solution. Please, look into it. And, hopefully they will.
And so would you say that would fit in the mobility section? Or are you thinking a standalone doesn't sound like we're like
Yeah.
thinking breadcrumbs throughout?
That's more like a loaf of bread at that point.
That's my struggling with it.
You know, I think we're gonna become a land of, roundabouts.
Could be.
As people, you know, if you go out to Costco and you go to the downs, I don't think too many people have difficulty getting around it.
people complain about them far more before they're built, and then
Right.
when they see that they work, they go, oh, yeah, yeah, that makes sense.
USM,
Yeah.
that was a crazy intersection.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll drive early in the morning and just be sitting at a red light with no one else around for.
Exactly.
1 minute, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
it's awful.
Well, they're safer too. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, once people figure it out.
Put that in the minutes, I may have to be.
If Roger requires food about.
We've solved it, we've solved the problem.
They just take a lot of space.
They do take a lot of space, yes.
The only thing I mentioned, I guess, as a resident of North Scarborough.
Yeah.
I might have said this in the past, like, my issue almost isn't even the traffic, like, moving slow, it's how fast. Like 90% of the time, it's cars, it's huge trucks, and they're just ripping down. You know, my section's 35. but
And no
that-
shoulders.
And there's no shoulders,
Yeah.
and so,
What road is this?
I'm off just a subdivision off of 114, kind of with the triangle.
Oh, okay.
There. So for me to do anything, I run every day. If I wanted to walk my dog, I have to get in my car and drive somewhere because
Yeah.
it's just not safe.
Yeah.
To do elsewhere. So if there was, you know, an ability to go for a run or go for a walk, I mean, that's one less car trip every time. And I see people, I mean, it's super sketchy. I see people every day, either running, walking, biking. People are still doing it. But it's just, that's scary. Safe at all.
Comfort factor.
There's like zero comfort, so people just do it because they don't want to get in the car and drive 10 minutes to the next closest safe spot.
Do you see that more as, in that area, like for recreation purposes, or do you think commuting would be an avenue that you pursue out there? And how, I'm trying to go back to the connectivity and where you're kind of connecting.
I know a lot
to,
of
or-
people from like I don't know if I understand the question exactly, but from a recreation standpoint, there's really no. It's just, they're all so short, dead end roads that you just like can't, you're just going back and forth like 1 minute at a time. There's no paths to my knowledge that connect all these like kind of single.
so
Out of the major way, yeah.
It's just everything just funnels into 114.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the wood. I mean, there's all woods, but there's no trail or anything back there to.
I think. That's harder to rectify, once things are built out, to connect those types of otherwise dead end facilities. We went on a real bend with cul-de-sacs there for a while. Everyone thought they were really great and, maybe they are for certain things, but from a higher level, when we think about, I think of connectivity as kind of like at both ends of a spectrum. One being like, we can connect neighborhoods through better design corridors or with sidewalks or, paths along otherwise really busy arterials. But really the better way to do it would be before you get to building out those roadways at all and design them to connect to each other. And this is multi-purpose because from a recreation standpoint, you would have a place to walk to without having to come out onto your busy road. And this is an unpopular opinion, but you also have other options to drive. So it provides vehicular connectivity in a way that eliminates like a fire hose of traffic coming out from one neighborhood onto our arterial roads. And I feel like we're kind of slowly picking away at that a little bit. I think it's a challenge in Scarborough because a lot of the new building, for lack of a better term, well, we're seeing good examples of it in the Downs, I will say that.
Yeah.
But in other parts of town, it's difficult when you only have a small relatively small piece of land.
They have a lot of
And-
environmental constraints.
Right,
And
with
it's
the marsh
subject
and
to
the-
a developer's programming and wetlands, yeah, it's really.
I would say that
I-
connectivity concept though of is built into the 2021 comprehensive plan.
Yes. I
So we have a
know.
whole section that talks about the need to cut down on approving new cul-de-sac developments, the need to have secondary street connectivity to allow for alternative pathways, both for pedestrian or non-vehicular traffic, as well as for fire and safety traffic, as well as for vehicular traffic. So I think the comprehensive plan and assuming the planning board is taking the comprehensive plan into account when they approve new developments, should be doing that much more so than they would have done 10 years ago. 10 years ago, you're right, it was a free for all. And we loved us our cul-de-sacs.
And now
So,
we're
but
reaping
I-
opportunities.
So, what you said just makes me think, like, we have sidewalks and stuff in here. But some of the residents I've talked to lately have been like, I don't care if it's a sidewalk, even if it's just like kind of a trail off of the main road. So does this contemplate that? And I don't know if that would meet your need, if you could at least walk your dog, if you knew there was like a safe trail that you could walk on versus like actually having a sidewalk.
When you
or-
say trail, are you define trail for us?
I'm thinking of like,
Shoulder.
Through the woods?
Through the
or, like,
woods.
along a road, but off the road.
I was thinking that one, I envision like there's a road and we're not extending the road, but there is like a little dirt path.
Yeah.
Right next to it that you feel safe enough to walk, that gives you enough room that, and the reason I'm bringing that up and thinking that is because of the land bond. That is in scope of using that for passive and active recreation, so if we wanted to make a bike trail path that's a little rough, if you like mountain biking, you can get around town.
Right,
But-
you don't mind running into poles.
Yeah, but it might not be like a true bike path, but it's like a step in the right direction, so that way you can at least walk your dog or go for a run.
And that gets into what other impediments are along there, because in order to feel safe, you need to have X number of feet
Yeah.
between the traffic going by you at 40 miles an hour.
Mhm.
And the feeling that, I'm far enough away from that traffic, but also I'm not walking on somebody's front yard or through their garden. I
Yeah,
mean,
Mhm.
that's the other piece of this, is
Yeah.
how wide is the easement?
Mhm.
Well, back to your point, though, I feel like this. So section 2, and I think I've said this repeatedly to the consultant, it feels very urban. it's all
Yes,
geared
it's
towards.
very cut and
Are
paste,
we in Portland?
very urban,
No,
cut
but
and paste.
we have half the town that needs something else possibly, right? So
Yep.
maybe that's kind of the missing piece. I'm not sure if there's something in here, maybe I'm missing it.
Well, we
But I thought
talked
it was
about
very
that.
Focused on
Yeah.
urban area, right?
We
Yeah.
talked about that at our last meeting.
Yeah, that's what we sent comments on, that we didn't like what they had
You
presented, and
see where they updated that, I guess, I'm not sure what.
Because it felt very urban cut and paste, like they had taken, they'd gone
They
to
did. They
Boston or,
grabbed the NACTO images.
yeah, and they weren't even appropriate to our circumstances.
Yeah, the diagrams still retain a lot of that. In section 2, they've got sort of sample road works and things like that. They all look like they came from Somerville or Cambridge, not from Scarborough.
Cause they did. Yeah, I think that's a good comment. We could ask, I don't know, for just more of, or an expanded rural.
And maybe I have you guys also think about, and maybe Jen, I don't know if you have any resources that. I think we're at a point now where Autumn and I are doing the heavy lifting on this. And so if you have any resources you could direct me to, more of a rural setting. Cause I feel like Autumn and I are gonna be doing probably a lot of editing to kind of try to fit these pieces in rather
Yes,
than.
I can help.
Okay, that would be very good.
One comment I want to make that occurred to me as we were talking about this too is there's not really a seasonality component that kind of screams out on this document, but it does strike me that there's a big difference between the traffic problems and the density that we face in the summertime versus the traffic problems and the traffic problems we face for the non-tourist part of the year. And there are parts of town that don't really face the same issues on that either. I don't know how to incorporate that in, and it might be too late in the document's development to do that, but I at least highlight that for folks. And we could probably manage a lot more transit options, for example, from Memorial Day to October 1st.
Sure, yeah.
Actually, the high crash incidences and so on actually focus on the fact that summer is when we have more accidents, we have more traffic. And it points to some very specific intersections where that's true. And it's specifically from like May until the end of October. So it
But
says.
it's not across the board. It goes
No,
back to Peter's
right.
original comment. Actually, I was actually getting data collection around, say, the Payne Road section over towards the mall. The Christmas season is the peak of traffic, actually. So
It'll be with
Black
Costco.
Friday,
Yes.
or actually now it's creeping closer to Halloween, but that's where those peaks. And then North Scarborough, I would argue, is probably year-round consistent because it's commuting traffic.
Yeah.
So it's also different pieces. So as we go through what Autumn was talking about is like looking at village centers, we can kind of really focus on maybe there's different seasons for different villages in town.
Yeah, and again, I think it's too late for this document, but Angela, you're exactly what I'm thinking about. There are areas that would look at solutions suitable for the summer months. And then there are parts of town like North Scarborough that probably need a 12-month solution, which means that if we put it in trails, for example, to allow for non-motorized connectivity, we got to think about plowing. We got to think about how do we keep trails up and running in the winter months, even though even though they're off the trail, the road network. But again, I don't think it's for this study. I just want to add the thought of seasonality to where we go forward from here.
Okay, I want to keep an eye on the time. So we've had a lot of mostly general comments with a couple of specific comments, but not many.
If you guys have specific, as Autumn started, I think
Okay.
was, if you have specific comments or like this line or that line, you can always email them
Great.
to us.
Yeah.
Because I think this is really a productive conversation.
It is productive. My question for you guys is, at what point are we gonna let great get in the way of good?
Yeah.
Because I came into this thinking, this is pretty good, like.
Yeah.
This conversation is when we say, well, maybe there's a couple more tweaks, but I just wanna be careful for staff that we're continuing to like tweak.
Yeah.
At what point do we lock it in so that we can do
Well,
what I think is the more interesting part, which is how do we actually
the next-
implement this?
I think I
Yeah.
alluded to the fact that our budget is over, we're
Okay.
way over budget. So at this point, any work that's happening is not with a consultant, it's with internal staff. So as obviously we're limited, so I think this was hopefully what we were considering the last kind of run through for this group until we go to public. Which obviously I would want this group to help facilitate that and kind of engage with that process and that we come out of that, I'm assuming with some additional tweaks. Hopefully not a revamp, hopefully it's some tweaking through the public comments and that public process, and then we have in front of council, and I don't know if that's where we're at, but
Pretty much, yeah.
I had thrown out asking Tom about availability for council workshop. It's kind of kind of walking through maybe each of the sections, and again, probably at a high level. I'm not sure how deep we get in, but I would want this group maybe to be engaged with that workshop and kind of be able to chime in with here's, you know, where we're going with this, to your point, it's like, this is one of the steps. We had steps before this is the next step, we have multiple steps after. But they were looking at. Tom gave me a date,
December 4th.
December 4th.
So that's like the big workshop, right? Where we're gonna talk about all the big things like this. Is that,
Oh, I
Or is that
don't think
different?
so.
I don't think so,
No.
no. I'm not sure.
okay,
And is that intended to be before or after public outreach on?
Well, I guess that's the question, is that's public, that's a
Okay,
part
or is
of
it-
public outreach.
Okay.
It is a public meeting, they can take public comment, or if we want to do something different, that's what this group needs to decide. We did a full open house at the beginning. Collected information, very specific questions kind of asked to try to engage conversation around trouble spots and connectivity and what do you see? It was open-ended questions, more like, what do you see as the issues? What do you see as the opportunities? Those type of things. So I don't want to go too broad, because now we have this, and so.
my thoughts are. You know. Again, I go back to staff's time and focus, like, I would hate to open this up to. A lot of public feedback and scrutiny to adjust it further. I think this is good to say, this is the study, this is the
We're
output.
presenting it.
Yeah, it's more of a presentation to the public. To get them excited about the next phase, which is the implementation phase, where we need more
Mhm.
feedback to help with prioritization.
Like,
Uh,
and money.
And money, yeah, and so I think that to me is like, it's more of an education opportunity for the public as opposed to. Give us your feedback and what would you like to
Do
tweak?
you think we can accomplish that in a council workshop as staff is presenting it to council, as we're presenting it to the public, or would you want it?
I think
not
we could.
enough?
I don't know, do you guys recall what Todd did? Before he presented his parks and facilities master plan, did he do a,
Or did it in council corner or
He
no?
did a workshop. I remember the workshop presentation, but I don't think he went to a separate public, but we could ask him. The
Yeah.
workshop tends to get more people, honestly. I find that the residents are kind of used to coming for workshops. Like our
Mhm.
original our original open house, we didn't get that much.
yeah,
The one thing
Do an
I'd say on
intro
this is
workshop.
where I think, this is where I think, excuse me, how we title it, how we describe it
Yeah.
makes the biggest difference. If we describe this as being broader than it really is, we're gonna throw off the public and we're gonna get a lot more people coming in saying, have you thought of this? Have you done this, et cetera? If we present this as an inventory of problem intersections and problem issues for intermodal or for not intermodal, for multimodal transportation across town, then the inventory, it's a pretty good inventory. I could see someone raising their hand and say, hey, did you think about my street? And we'd either say, yes, it's on 2.1 or 4.3 or whatever, or, oh, actually, no, that didn't come up. And that might be something that would do that. But the more we steer the public towards viewing this as an inventory for future solutioning, the better I think we'll have as an outcome for the public input and for tying this up in a bow to get to that next stage that John, you're talking about.
I think you're right too, Peter, because our timing is sort of bad coming after the Gorham connector, all of those discussions and people paying attention to transportation. And we've been working on this for like 2 years, so it's not an
Well,
outcome,
and
but we
also-
want to be really careful that it's not, this master plan solution here the town's swooping in with.
Well, the other thing is we've got 3 new counselors.
Mhm.
And the 3 that they're replacing were all extremely engaged on transportation and long range planning issues. So we're gonna, if we drop this in front of council, or when we drop this in front of council, we know that there's some risk no matter what. So the more that we can shape the discussion by packaging this properly, I think the better outcome we're gonna have.
And even for the public too, to say, on the one hand, yes, Autumn, I agree with you, but on the other hand, I don't know, let's take that energy, that we heard so clearly from the public about their transportation concerns in that area. And hope to, get their attention on this and say, hey, we heard you, we've actually been looking at this for 2 years, despite what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
Did we get it right? Like, are we looking at the right, is our inventory accurate in your opinion, or close?
Actually, to be a resident of Scarborough, you have to complain about traffic. I mean, it's right.
It is
The birth
biggest.
It's been here as long as I've lived in this town.
I just
I-
have to continually say we don't actually have traffic here.
Yeah, I know.
But-
Rush hour traffic.
Spoken like a
It's still not even rush hour traffic.
Well, actually, all you have to do is go down to southern New England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
It's not that
Yeah.
far away.
Yeah, every resident should be required to go down there for a weekend. Drive around.
Field trip.
Wherever they
Right.
want.
Well, the Cape on a Friday.
They come back here and this is a piece of cake.
Try the Jersey Shore
It
too.
doesn't feel like that though.
Drive from Logan Airport to Newton, Massachusetts at 4 p.m. once a year.
Right.
Everyone has to do that.
So this is gonna likely be a joint workshop on December 4th with this committee and the council. Is that I think that makes sense.
Does that make sense to this group? I mean, that was.
I think
one
so.
proposal.
They do some back.
Oh, okay, thanks.
Do you kick on his house?
No, he's back.
No.
We gotta talk louder.
Well, and I like the timing of that
Okay.
because we go into council goal setting. So I would encourage this group, maybe in the November meeting, to really think about if you want to collectively take this to suggest a council goal that we may want to propose that advances this work to that next step. And like, what does that goal language look like? And it might be something, Adam, that you and Angela can also partner and figure out, because it seems like there's a lot of connection to the work you're already doing that's in flight. So how do we make it cohesive so that it's aligned to where staff is going next year, so that you guys can get some focus and prioritization on how this gets implemented? Because we'll have new counselors who are all ears to be like,
Right.
what do we want to focus on? You guys can help us figure out what that focus is.
That's great.
I do really think though, it's important that the public get aware of all this stuff. that's
Yeah.
going on.
Mhm.
Because, geez.
Well, the feedback though from the public who came with regard to the Gorham connector, because a lot of them sat here through the meeting afterwards said, wow, you
Didn't know
guys
you
are
guys were
really
doing
talking
this.
about all this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
they had an
You gotta
awareness
get a
that,
PR
gee,
company apparently.
Yeah.
I think that's important to maybe when this gets positioned on the 4th, because there's a lot in here of, especially for the new counselors, there's a lot of things that are already in flight that
Yeah.
aren't part of this. Make sure that there's awareness of that, and then what's new in this that's gonna help shape the next step, because I think like that Mussey Road project, I always hear from people, that's their top priority.
Yeah.
Once that's fixed, I hope we start to hear people say, wow, the town's actually doing something, because now there's a light at
What are you talking?
on
Traffic signal. at
putting the traffic
about?
signal. Yeah.
I thought you were talking about up there where it hooks up the Fan Road.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
Or-
yeah, that,
Okay.
yeah, that's where they want it, like people want.
Well, the
something
good
like-
thing about the new councilors,
Mhm.
you know, other than
The
Pressy?
meeting amazing.
Pressy,
Mhm.
the others, I'm sure,
Yeah,
are all well aware of all the traffic issues.
yeah, mhm,
So.
Yeah.
It's not like they're coming yet, they've been dropped down in town and say. "Geez,"
yeah.
Like Autumn, you know, this is not a big deal.
Mhm.
My doctor moved from Portland Farm Road up to Spring,
Mine too.
probably the same
Same.
practice. Main Health.
Oh,
And
yeah, okay.
he said, he said, I like to get out and walk and bike at lunchtime. He said, I can't do that here. I said, yeah, you are taking your life,
We had the Eastern Trail
you're
before.
taking your
yeah.
life in your hands to go
Yeah.
out at noon in that area.
Yeah.
But to your point, I mean, that's what we talk about with developers and all this, stuff. Like, there's advantage, there's things that bring people to a certain place, right? And so like, to your point is like, we picked this place because we're walkable to the Eastern Trail, or we're near the beach, or we're near these other great resources. And so people wanna be here, whether there's traffic or environmental standards or anything else.
Yeah.
They're coming. So that's a good point, though, talking about the presentation to kind of like, okay, where have we come? So to Roger's always reminding us about the Route 1 corridor study. I think that's great. We didn't really get, there is some access management in here, but we didn't want to just take that and say, okay, we're putting it here too, because it's enough, like, set it separate, and then we're building on it, and like I said, we'll have other corridors, so it's gonna be pieces of information that all come
But to
together.
use Haggis as an example, say, here is where we had a blackboard opportunity, and here's what we see is happening. As an example of what we
Proactive.
would like to do, as we move forward.
Yeah.
I mean, because you've
Yeah, I
got
think-
that,
That's an important one, because I think that Haggis should really be presented as an example. Because otherwise, they're gonna say, well, what about Route 1? What about Payne Road? What about X, Y, and Z? But I think Haggis is a great appetizer for the public to understand what John keeps referring to as the fun stuff coming down the road, the next step of what we do. So if we present I think the Haggis work is great, I think, but presenting it sort of without guidance runs the risk of the public viewing this and saying, well, why did you just choose that one? So I think a little bit of framing around Haggis for what that means for the future will be important to set expectations.
And the
That's a
other
good point.
thing about Vegas also is that, when you're talking about that, that's where the funding is important,
Mhm.
because residents are gonna say, well, why are they spending all that money there and not in my neighborhood?
Yeah.
So if there's money coming from grants or some other way, it's
Yeah.
important for them, just like all this work that's being done in conjunction with the downs,
Mhm.
the taxpayers aren't paying for any of that. But
Correct.
the taxpayers think they are,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
and it's gotta be clear.
yeah, yeah.
And helping
I-
people
and I
understand
look
that that's
at-
why we. Go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I think helping the public understand that that's sometimes why we prioritize, because the money comes from the taxes from Risbara, or they're coming from DOT that comes from the sky, or they're coming from the feds out of the sky, and that will drive what we do first. You know, Route 1 may come be ahead of everyone because Route 1's a federal highway. And that means that 114 is just not as important right now. And helping people understand that that's why sometimes we prioritize. It's purely because that's when the dollars come, not why, but when the dollars come, I think is important. And the Haggis, again, that Haggis mini study within this document gives us an opportunity to help frame that and explain that. I think that's a really good point.
I mean, I think there's still a huge public education that I've been more educated since I've been on council of, like, the town doesn't control every single road. And, you know, I think even for the traffic safety work that happens, I think people are always like we keep getting emails from people about speed limit.
Yeah.
And what can the town do to change the speed limit? And it's like, we don't manage the speed limit. So I still feel like in general, we have a big traffic problem, but it's not a lot of things that we can solve
Our
unilaterally.
hands are a little tied.
Yeah.
It's like
Get
the
a partner,
islands,
yeah.
you know, people complained about the islands. I can't turn where I want to.
Mhm.
Well, there's a safety issue there, but
Yeah.
also we've got another component of DOT
Yeah,
guidelines that say you will do this, and we're just trying to do them
yeah,
in a more attractive way than bollards.
You know, I'll never forget when we're doing the, planning board, the Yellow Bridge development out there on Holmes Road.
Mhm.
And the people were concerned about the speed, and I think you mentioned in one of the meetings, if the state comes in and does a study
mhm,
and finds out it's a speed limit now is 40 miles an hour right out there.
mhm.
And if they do a study and people, they find out people are traveling 45, well, they'll change the speed limit to 45.
Mhm.
So they won't necessarily
Right.
go down, you know, just because people
They have
want
the
to.
opposite effect.
Oh.
That's why I always go 9 miles off the speed limit. I want to make sure that
Yeah.
that study records me driving at 59 on the 50. I agree.
They're changing their DOT said.
Yeah.
What
But
I
in a rural
consider-
setting like that, I don't know if they're getting there. I think in the are in an urban setting, we saw that on Maple Ave, where,
I've heard them talk about
they
it.
went down.
Some other areas.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So in other communities.
They're factoring other criteria, I
Like,
would say just in the past year.
like safety.
Like,
You know, one of those
Yeah,
things.
So like
Like,
maybe it's
concept
not
coming from
safe, like just because, so the way, yeah, just because everyone's driving fast doesn't mean we should be doing that, and now they are factoring in. Considering, I'll say, taking into consideration more of the safety issues. And I even heard Randy Illian say recently that, in a different community, if, you know, you should be looking at, like, this section of roadway is a good candidate for, a closer look at the speed limit, and if the speed data comes back at anything other than, what, I'm forgetting the numbers, but like, whatever the next logical lower bracket was.
Yeah.
And he said, you know, it's a good candidate for lowering the speed limit, and if that doesn't address the speeding problem, then we have a roadway design problem, and we should look at that. So that conversation alone definitely stuck with me, because that opinion seemed
That's a huge.
somewhat
shift.
new to
Yeah.
me.
I would say just in the past
From the-
year, there's been other factors, that they're
Yeah.
actually considering. Which is great. I will say they still, you know, at the end of the day are like, this is what it is. So I guess my just caution is DOT does it independently. So if the residents, or if we talk about it in this group, they don't really factor in advocacy. Like, if someone is like adamant, it needs to be this, and this is what has to happen, they really do shut that out. And look at, no, we're looking at the facts, and they have to justify it, and they come up with it. I think they are factoring some of the things that everyone keeps advocating about, like, you're in a dense neighborhood. It's a lot of walkers, a lot of bikers. They're actually factoring those in now, which is different. But they do kind of drown out the noise. That doesn't necessarily.
So, if a road was 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And they do the traffic study,
Yes,
and they find people are traveling like 45 miles an hour. But then some of the residents who live there
Mhm.
want to reduce to 35.
Right.
There's a chance they may not change it at all,
oh, correct.
because most of the people driving are traveling at 40.
Because what they used to always look at, it's what's your comfortable speed?
Yeah.
And so that tells me if a large percentage
Whoa.
of the people traveling on the road are comfortable driving at 45 miles an hour, then that's where they set it at that comfortable kind of speed.
Whether it's appropriate to the neighborhood or not.
Well, because, yeah, the road was there first,
Okay.
like the railroad, railroad was there
Yeah.
first.
I gotta get the message out. I gotta get the message out. To travel 50 miles an hour on Fog Road.
We do, there's a lot of contexts that are changing, like to your point, it's like, okay, this was a rural section of road, and now it's in, it's more dense, it's built up, we're seeing all that infill happen.
Looks like Payne Road, you
And
know?
so we are asking
Right.
for different speed studies, throughout town for DOT to relook at certain roads. Like you said, we're cautious when we pick. It has to come from a municipal request for DOT to even look at a road. Cause they, like I said, they kind of really keep that separate from the residents, and so they only kind of will take that from the town. I will say I typically have 6 on the list and it takes 2 years to get one done. And so Scarborough is high maintenance. I will say I'm pretty high maintenance. And
Well, we're
it's like
dynamic.
poking at them about more and more and more. So I will say they are very limited staff. So that's where it just makes it even more important for us internally to do it, which we have fantastic police department that does speed studies for us. While DOT will not take those as data. It's anecdotal to them, but it at least helps us prioritize before we go to DOT. So we can prioritize internally and we can discuss it and say, here's where we need to get DOT to focus. Because quite frankly, they got every road in the state of Maine. And I'm sure there's someone on every road in the state of Maine that would like to have their speed limit addressed, but
So they have your number on blocker, right?
not yet. Not yet.
Then she'll use Autumn's, she'll use Autumn's number.
Send them a nice gift back.
Lots of beer.
That was a sidetrack. So, I think we're about it.
So yes,
too.
I think, sounds like we are generally agreeing that a workshop with the council on December 4th is a good idea.
We mentioned the November meeting, which is, we always get into
Holidays.
the holidays. And then, like I said, the 4th will be meeting with council.
So that's a definite, the 4th of December?
Tom gave me the date. It's up to council leadership,
Okay.
but it sounds like Tom would, if you guys
That's
are
a
comfortable
council
that he
meeting?
would present.
That night?
Mhm.
Okay.
So I'm suggesting that might be kind of our next meeting.
The 4th of December?
Yeah,
So we
Well,
wouldn't, so we
workshop.
wouldn't have a meeting
Unless you
before
want
then
to,
to
the week
strategize.
of Thanksgiving. Would be the night.
I'll be here.
And I guess I'd want to know if there's anything in preparation for that presentation that's worth us kind of hashing out. Although I'll probably have to have the packet the next day to cancel. Well, I don't know.
What about if we,
Might have
hey,
to
what
do
about if
the-
we just plan to not meet, but we send you all the presentation like November 18th? And then you could review it that week, and like Angela said, we have to have it the Wednesday before, maybe? What do you think?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
An email meeting.
And then you
I-
can actually give us comments on the presentation and
It'd be helpful to see a bullet points or an outline of what your verbal remarks will be, Angela. So I'm guessing that this will take place, you'll present the report but also give a summary of it. Just how you're framing that summary would be helpful to see, so we could understand how at least verbally this will be presented.
Angela, are you doing it or is John Adams gonna do it?
yeah, we talked about the consultants doing it, so, I would think I would probably do an intro. And maybe do some of the background stuff that we just talked about and have them do the kind of meat of the actual document for council.
Because of some of the comments that or the discussions we've had over the last several months, I'd like to get a framing of how they're thinking of setting that up. Because I think we've pushed them in directions that weren't part of their original of what they originally presented to us. So I want to make sure that they stay on our tack.
Do you have
and,
suggestions? If you want to send me some suggestions, maybe you have some bullets that you could point out, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I will do that, Angela. Yeah, I'll commit to doing
That'd be
that.
great.
Yes.
Okay.
And so we're not going to meet on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, is the idea?
Correct.
That was the idea, that we would
Okay.
give you all this draft on November 18th, and then you could have that week to give us comments. And that would give us enough time to turn around any presentation changes.
Similarly, then, when will we meet after the workshop to discuss and do that?
In
Let's see, it's going to-
December, your December meeting is on Christmas Eve.
24th. Christmas
Exactly.
Eve.
I have it as the 17th.
Is it?
Is that wrong?
That's the, aren't you on the, are you the 3rd or the 4th?
December
We're the fourth Wednesday, right?
fourth
Or fourth
Tuesday.
Tuesday, sorry.
Well, somebody's gonna be here on the 24th.
Right.
I'm not.
But that's just where, I think typically we get into this every year and we kind of do these, we pick, I know it's hard, and so, but we can pick another date that may, like early January or something, we don't have to wait until.
Yeah.
Later.
I just worry that if we wait until the end of January, we will lose some of the flavor of what we had for the workshop, so.
Well, I guess the question would be, you're thinking, so we get feedback, I think that's a good point, though, is to have a deadline, I think going back to John's comment is. We do the workshop on December 4th. And really collect either council or public comments. Is that a week, is that 2 weeks, and then we have this final, so I'm wondering if then. We're in front of council is kind of that deadline. Is what council meeting would we be in front of to ask them to either accept or endorse this document? So that's really the question.
Either January 15th or February 5th.
So we need to meet between the 4th and January 15th.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. Exactly, you picked up on it exactly, Angela. It's like. So,
So maybe depending on how that meeting goes, what does that third week of December look like? The 17th?
Looks good.
So
to
are they
me.
only meeting once in January?
Well, I think so. I asked Tom about it because January 1st is a holiday and that's their first Wednesday. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming the
Only
There's
15th.
there's 3 Wednesdays or 5 Wednesdays that month.
17th works for me.
Yeah.
So
So
you're saying December 17th?
It works for me. I
December
don't know about anybody
17th.
else.
yeah, that works. That'd work for me.
That's
I'd be
good.
for that.
Roger,
Yeah, that's fine.
okay, sounds like 17th works. Jen? You're being kind of quiet.
Jen, it'll be a back-to-back planning board meeting again.
My favorite,
Oh.
those are just hard at my house.
And
but,
council. It's a good time week.
Oh,
Oh, that's
yeah.
gonna be fun.
you guys have a third one, yeah, I guess in that context. you said that. Around.
Well, on the other hand, if the purpose of the meeting is to rehash and to focus.
I was quiet, right?
It shouldn't, if the purpose of the meeting is to rehash what we heard,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be very complicated
Yeah,
or.
I think that's fine, with 17,
I mean, we could do it as a remote meeting.
particularly if it works out.
That's easier for Jen.
What about if we pencil it in for December 17th and then we see how December 4th goes? And then we kind
No
of base it on
comments.
that.
Yeah, no comment.
Nobody, it's perfect.
Yeah. I think the piece that I'm still interested in getting guidance from this group and staff is like, based on what we've learned, what is a good goal around transportation that you would want council to consider that supports the advancement of whatever the next step is for next year? So
Set
that's where
set aside money for what, 5 miles of sidewalk? That's my planner goal.
I'm gonna say that too, it's gonna be sidewalk connectivity,
yeah.
we have so many gaps and holes, and it's gonna end up being a CIP probably, but it's going to be maybe around. It sounds like what I'm hearing from this group, this is the response, I guess, to what I'm hearing from the group is. It should be probably something biker ped focused, and whether that's a bike and ped study for a certain area of town or implementation funds to
If you were to
actually.
do sidewalks on Route 1, for instance, to have them on both sides.
That's what I'm thinking, we've
that would be
identified that already in the Route 1 corridor study, has those gaps
Yeah, that's
identified, it's all there.
Go like
Kinda
dust
sets
on it.
up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well, how does that, I don't want to prolong it, but
Yeah.
how does that tie into the Route 1 study?
it's identified in there, the gaps,
Okay.
yeah,
that's what.
that was part of
That's what
it.
you're talking about, is implementing part of that,
Implementing
study,
part of
building
that
them
study.
out.
Because it's, if I recall, there's 7 different versions of Route 1 going through
Yes.
from Saco.
Correct.
So is there reducing lanes, adding lanes? You
At
know,
this point, I'm thinking low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
For a quick turnaround would be kind of supporting. Kind of this connectivity of pedestrian. Or even, I hate to say it, we probably should start having a conversation around winter operations, because I know they hear a lot about that too, and that needs to be a council decision and council action. So, and I know it's too big to say we're gonna plow every sidewalk, so maybe there should be a goal around that about sidewalks. We heard it in the surveys, talking about kind of implementing some more sidewalks, but then also how we maintain those.
Mhm.
If we had sidewalks on both sides of one, that would be, most of the public uses one at some
Mhm.
point. I mean, that says something's happening here.
Yeah. might be
And
visible.
we've got enough incidences, particularly around Dolphin,
Mhm,
of people
Totally.
mhm.
crossing
know,
traffic
it's-
inappropriately.
Part of a conversation for another time, but in
So,
terms of like prioritizing projects.
No, but at
One
least
of
it
the
gives them a
factors
place to
that I
stay.
would
Target.
suggest would be, looking at the area that's certainly where we have, high crash incidents. But also where we have high risk, so that's, any place where there's evidence of people walking and you can go see, you don't need a study, you can go look, you saw it
Like the
today.
guy riding his bike in the grass.
Where people are wanting to travel. And where the alternative, if they opt not to do that and opt to share the lane, which is their right, or, if there literally isn't space for them to do that, now they're in with moving traffic. And if there isn't adequate shoulder space, the faster that traffic is going, the higher risk those people are at. And so, the neighborhood streets, these should be low candidates for sidewalks, not no candidates, but lower, because people are walking and biking at speeds closer to what people are driving at versus Route 1, Broad Turn, Fog Road, some of these others where like the delta is really high. It's
Mhm.
really risky for.
My only question,
So-
my only question on Route One is there has been a quarter study on that, and there's a lot of facets to Route One. So do we want to maybe look at another road like Broad Turn or like Fog Road? Instead of attacking Route One as the initial ask. And I throw that out. I think Route One would be great. I just worry about the complexity of Route One versus what we might be able to attack in a more discrete package on one of the other corridors we identified.
I think, like Jen had said, everyone has tried to walk on Route 1. I think that's something that we
Scary.
heard at the
Scary.
open houses too, but also something like a Broad Turn Road or even Fog Road, those type of ones are going
Which
to
is
need.
like Fog Road.
I'm giving you kudos.
She's
on
got it
pointing
paid.
out that it is needed. Is going to be a high dollar design.
Yeah. The-
And it might be taking people's property.
Right, the route, I think of Route 1 as, we've already studied it, so we know, we can point to that. And it is relatively low hanging fruit because you have a close drainage system and there are curbs out there, and so it's paving, it's infilling sidewalk, not necessarily paving, but. It's not quite that simple, but generally speaking, behind the curb line, there is right of way in most cases there, you might have some there will be conflicts of some sort, but as opposed to like an open ditch drainage with no gravel shoulder on Broad Turn, it's a completely different scale of project, not that it doesn't need to be done also, but,
Or even as Craig had mentioned, like Gorham Road and going somewhere west of the turnpike, that we probably do have the right of way and some ability, it seems a little easier maybe. And as you were having that conversation in the back of my head, I'm thinking about Larrabee Farm and looking at the future of kind of recreational use out there and how do you connect neighborhoods to that? So I'm also thinking about when we do projects, kind of spidering out, like,
Yeah.
it's like, how do you get there? Well, maybe it's just that you're looking at Gorham Road in a different way, Route 114, and how you get people to this, yeah.
When you're talking about Route 1 too, I tend to agree with Peter because your return on investment.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be that great on Route 1.
Yeah.
Say versus say Black Point Road or Pleasant Hill
Yeah.
Road or any of these other where any day you could see people walking or riding, like trying, the beaches and everything there. I just don't see a lot of people gonna be walking. on
Oh, I
Route
do
1.
see a lot of people trying
Yeah.
to walk on Route
There's a
1.
lot of people.
There are a
walking.
lot of people. And
You
if,
gotta get up
Maybe
Long
up
Road,
here.
get
Well,
up
even
on
to
the-
get to the bus.
Up here.
down here,
Everywhere.
down here.
I think for the point of John's question though, just the really generic, like we need to add sidewalks for pedestrian connectivity as a council goal. And then we could debate it for hours on end and
Yeah.
use the information in the plan and the Route
Yeah.
1 corridor study and look at the gaps and see where it might be, we fill in 5 gaps on Route 1 and we fill in 2 gaps on Black Point. Maybe we're all over the place, but that is the goal, is to increase pedestrian connectivity.
And we put up a little sign, thanks to the transportation.
Yeah.
committee for adding the. and
Your-
council for adding this extra
Yes,
sidewalk.
yes. Yeah.
Come walk with us.
Walk with us, right?
I like that, Autumn. I think that's. a
I guess
simple
on that
goal.
one, John, is that good enough? Is it, our ask is an allocation for sidewalk connectivity to be allocated, TBD. Is that a good ask?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it gives us focus on, like, from a transportation perspective, what's important, what's practical, what's on staff's mind, what's on the committee's mind, so that we can focus and deliver something specific. And I think a generic, we want more sidewalks, and this committee can help to focus on where I think would be a good focus for this committee, maybe for next year, if that's the goal that council ultimately moves forward with.
Cause it supports schools, it supports shopping, it supports, people
Yeah.
getting out for recreation, but getting
It's
the
also
town services.
a great opportunity for trip reduction, because you can, with better connectivity, you could park once and walk
Mhm.
between, as opposed to like being another car through a light that's.
I know, I've been
already
walking
at capacity.
for long-range planning. from home.
Yeah. I know, now that you're,
Now I've got a
sidewalk
trail,
open.
that's right.
That's right.
I have to walk right by the house, but other than that, waiting for the shotgun.
I got yelled at about that trail. You better walk on it.
I am walking on it, believe me. I am walking on it. Always with great
Mason
vigilance,
Village.
though.
Up to Ward Street,
Yeah.
your village.
Oh, up
Yeah,
to Ward
up to
Street.
Ward
Okay,
Street,
okay.
yeah.
You approved it.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. I didn't know.
Right,
All right, we're done?
so you will hear from me.
great.
I've also found out that by driving through the apartments, I can save myself 2 minutes.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks.
Opposed to
Autumn.
driving.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we-
Bye, guys.
we
Good night.
I drive through the apartments and turn.
Just punch that gate open.
It's gone. It has been gone.